Okay, well, today I'm going to use old stereo views of alpine glaciers to highlight the impact of global warming. And glaciers are actually very simple to understand. They grow by accumulating snow during the winter, and they shrink by melting in the heat of the summer. And so if the climate is cold and wet, they will grow, and if it's hot and dry, they will shrink. So they act as a sort of bellwether for climate change. I'm going to look specifically at photographs of the Mer de Glace in Chamonix. This is one of the largest glaciers in the Alps. And all the images will come from my collection, apart from this one, which is courtesy of the Ruskin at Lancaster University. And John Ruskin was very possibly the first person to take photographs of the Mer de Glace Glacier in 1849. But this image is from a subsequent trip in 1854. This is a daguerreotype of the Mer de Glace from the lookout point at Montanvert. And this view has actually been a tourist attraction since 1741, when British adventurers Wyndham and Pocock first described the scene as looking like a sea that had been frozen solid in the middle of a violent storm. And their description of a sea of ice, or in French, a mer de glace, is the name that's used for the glacier to this day. The first stereo photographers arrived in Chamonix in 1856, and the most renowned of them was Claude-Marie Ferrier. And in this image, he has taken it from the surface of the glacier, looking back up at Montanvert. And on the skyline here, we can actually see the original hotel, which was opened in the 1840s. And what I want to highlight on this photograph is this, at the edge of the glacier, the sort of light gray rock band. And this shows you where the glacier has come from. So you can see that it's still very, very close to its absolute maximum extent, judging from the amount that it shrunk back. Now, in 1859, Ferrier joined forces with Charles Soulier to bring us that amazing series of glass stereo views. And this is one of Chamonix around about 1862. And in the background, the white diagonal line coming down the mountain is the Mer de Glace Glacier. And you can see that it comes right down to the valley floor. Today from Chamonix, you cannot see this glacier at all. And in order to see the glacier, you have to get higher. And one of the best views is from Flégère, which is on the side of the valley opposite. And Flégère is about the same altitude as Montanvert. And Montanvert is actually on this, tree-lined shoulder over here. Now, I'm going to show you a series of photographs from this same viewpoint. This is a view from around 1860, and you can see that the glacier is filling its valley and tumbling over a band of rocks and coming right down the face of the mountain. Around about 1910 to 1920, this image by Verly shows along the side of the glacier the light gray rock band which has been exposed, to show you how much the glacier has shrunk between 1860 and 1920. But the glacier is still fairly full, and it's still coming over the rock band, although not nearly as great volume as before. And it's in great contrast to the image today from Flégère, where you can't actually see the glacier at all unless you look much further up the valley. And the glacier has shrunk back completely from this rocky promontory. So what's been going on? Well, the early photographers were in Chamonix Valley right at the end of the Little Ice Age. And this was a cool period in the 16th to 19th centuries where the global climate cooled by between 0.5 and 1 degree centigrade. And it appears to have been triggered actually by volcanic activity. And the glaciers started to grow, and they reached their maximum extent for 10,000 years. And in 1610, the Mer de Glace actually reached the valley floor and destroyed 2 hamlets that had been built in the valley. And by 1644, it was on the doorstep of the larger village of Les Bois. And the villagers invited the local bishop to come and bless the village and exorcise the glacier. And he must have been well connected, because the glacier stopped growing and the village was spared. There was then a secondary maximum in 1822, and this was following a volcanic explosion at Tambora, which is actually the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history. In 1856, this is a picture by Durieux of the front of the glacier. And you can see that the height of the front of the glacier is about maybe 20 meters high. Now, in 1820, when the glacier was growing, it was measured to be advancing at a rate of between 1 to 2 meters per day. So you can imagine how terrified the villagers were that seeing this irresistible force slowly coming down on their village. And because of that, we actually have a good written record of the length of the glacier dating back to the 16th century. And you can see from this that it reached its maximum extent in about 1644, but it pretty much stayed there until the 1850s. And so the early photographers were capturing the glacier very much close to its maximum extent. You can see the rapid decline in the length of the glacier over the last 100 years, and it's actually shrunk back 3 kilometers from its previous maximum. And since 1880, they've actually been able to measure the depth of the glacier as well. And this is level with Montanvert. In 1880, it was almost 250 meters deep. And today it's under 50 meters deep. So there's been a dramatic loss of ice. And that's reflected in the photographs. This is another series of images now taken from Montanvert. The first one is by William England. He was the principal photographer of the London Stereoscopic Company, and he left them in 1863 to become independent. And his first commission was to photograph the Alps on behalf of the Alpine Club. And this is one of the 130 original images from his first tour in 1863, showing the Mer de Glace from Montanvert. And you can see here that the sea of ice description is still very apt. The same image in 1910, taken by the local Chamonix photographer Auguste Coutet. And you can see that the glacier has shrunk back quite a lot, but it's still fairly significant. And you can see there's a lot more tourists. And this is because a little train was built up to Montanvert, and that opened in 1909. And here is the little train taken in 2012. And once again, you can see that the glacier has shrunk back quite a large amount. And from the rubble and the detritus at the side gives you an idea of where it's come from. One of the popular excursions from Montanvert was to go across the glacier to the other side. And this has given us some of the most evocative Victorian tourist images that I think you'll see of the men and women in their very inappropriate dress crossing the glacier. This one's by Charnot, about 1870. And this dramatic one is by Adolphe Braun, also around 1870. And I can't think of anything more ridiculous to wear crossing an icy glacier than a big crinoline skirt. The poor woman can't even see her feet. It's little wonder really that Mary Shelley, after crossing the glacier like this, was inspired to write Frankenstein. And once they reached the other side of the glacier, they came to a little snack bar called the Chapel. And the view from the Chapel is very different from that of Montanvert because you're 300 meters lower down. And so you're looking out really over the glacier at its level. And in this image from 1861 by Ferrier and Soulier, you can see that you're actually below the surface of the glacier and it's tumbling down towards you. From similar viewpoint in 1900, this is an image by Underwood and Underwood photographer. And here you can actually see the snack bar itself. and the glacier is still pretty significant, stretching out in front of you. And Montanvert is up here on this ridge on the other side. Now, if we compare that to today, this is a view from the chapeau that I took in 2015, and you can see how sad the situation has become. There's now no glacier at all at the level of Le Chapeau, and Montanvert is actually way up here on the ridge. You can see really the dramatic impact that global warming is having on our glaciers. So what's actually going on? Well, the glaciers are really a remnant of the last ice age. Ice ages are cyclical, natural cyclical phenomenons. There's a periodicity of about 100,000 years caused by oscillations in the Earth's orbit around the sun. And the last ice age maximum was 25,000 years ago, approximately. And then the North Polar ice cap descended south, covering Canada and much of North America as far south as New York. In Europe, there was a secondary ice cap over the Alps. The Chamonix Valley would have been filled with about 2 kilometer deep ice, and the ice extended out onto the surrounding plains almost as far as Lyon. Then the climate warmed up, and 6,000 years ago, we know that the tree line was actually higher in the Alps than it is today. And so there is this natural cyclical periodicity to the glacial periods. Then we had a cooler period, the Little Ice Age. The glaciers came back down into the valleys. And then recently we've had a cyclical recovery from the Little Ice Age, but that's been accelerated by human activity. And what's happened is over the past 100 years, that because of the burning of fossil fuels, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased by 50%. And carbon dioxide absorbs infrared radiation, prevents it escaping into space, and so it's called a greenhouse gas. And there's several other greenhouse gases, including methane and water vapor, but carbon dioxide accounts for over 80% of the greenhouse effect, and so it's the one that we should look at in most detail. And this is the chart of the carbon dioxide concentration in parts per million over the past 1,000 years. And you can see that the average has been around 280 parts per million. And today it's about 420 parts per million. And it's increased very rapidly in the last 100 years. And if we look at the global temperature over the same period, then we can see that there's evidence there of the cooler period from round about 1600, which corresponds to the Little Ice Age. But we have this almost hockey stick effect of global warming right now. And that's really reflecting almost identically the carbon dioxide increase in the atmosphere. So there's no contention that the global warming is really a man-made effect. Now, the use of images to comment on global warming was taken a step further by a Swiss artist called Alan Alpenfelt. And he was inspired by William England's photographs from the 1860s. And this is another England view of the Mer de Glace from Montanvert. And Alan actually traveled all around Switzerland using public transport and trying to identify the exact location that William England took his photographs. And then he recorded them audiovisually to create a multimedia virtual reality installation. And this is Alan in the baseball cap, taking up the same position as one of William England's assistants in a photo, in the previous photo. So we're now going to fade back 160 years to look at what the glacier looked like back then. And I think this is really a stunning representation of how large the impact on our glaciers has been, the impact of global warming. It's quite staggering how much ice has disappeared. So there we have it. There's I think global warming is one of these topics which is quite difficult to get your head around, because we're talking about a 1 degree change in temperature during my lifetime. And for a human, that's really imperceptible and sounds rather insignificant. Indeed, from the Scottish perspective, it's not nearly enough. But from nature's and the environment's perspective, a 1 degree change coming so rapidly is far from insignificant and has had major impacts on the natural world. And I believe that the old stereoscopic record of the alpine glaciers provides a remarkable resource to create a proxy measure of what the impact of climate change is, and is a useful educational tool for highlighting that. So thank you for your attention.